Okay, there was quite a bit of information in your packet, so I want to kind of break it down for you and explain the process that the city's been through to receive these funds. It was early in March when the water started rising in Moscow due to flooding. And as you all remember, on March 9th and 10th was the night that the Bridge Street Bridge area started flooding. And that water receded and it went down, but it also caused a lot of damage in the meantime. And so in the past, the city's really just dealt with these issues and used in-kind sources through the volunteers and the fire department, city staff, and managed it. However, this year, there was a presidential declaration that was issued on May 19th that gave special consideration to 9 northern Idaho counties. Latah County was one of them. And that made us eligible for different sources of funding. And under that, FEMA was involved, and then also the Idaho Office of Emergency Management. And there were a couple of different programs, but at the time we weren't sure how it was all going to work out. So originally Les submitted an application for a lump sum with quite a bit of project information in it in April. And we weren't sure where that would go or how it would all filter out. We were hoping to get some reimbursement, and the county had put out information through their disaster services. And we continued to get emails. We weren't sure how it would work out. And after that first round of information was submitted, we then received notification that different meetings were going to be held. And Steve Schulte and I actually attended a meeting in Orfino on June 7th. And we had officials from the Idaho Office of Emergency Management and then FEMA. And it was well attended. In advance, we filled out several different forms, and from that they kind of filtered out that there were going to be 2 sets of different programs. The one that the Idaho Office of Emergency Management would manage, and the considerations for that were going to be a little bit different than what FEMA was doing. I have to say it was still confusing on what was all going to happen. I just filled out lots of forms and paperwork, and we attended the meetings. After the meeting, we were told that we would be contacted by FEMA for a kickoff meeting. And then also in the meantime, we started receiving paperwork for the Idaho Office of Emergency Management under the Emergency Relief Fund, which was different than the money that FEMA was letting cities apply for. And the ERF fund, as we call it, was recognizing that it had been a really hard winter in Idaho for a lot of counties, especially those that were recognized under the Presidential Disaster Declaration, and that the ongoing rain and the winter storms that started in December were going to have an impact on our streets and roads. And so within your packet, you see that we've received 2 separate different programs of awards. And so I'll go through those with you tonight and try to explain how this all came down and what we still have to do and what we're accepting tonight. FEMA came and visited us on June 21st, and at that time we went on a tour with them of the Joseph Street project, which was on Joseph and Mountain View. There was deterioration in the pavement there. There was damage done to the ditch in front of the LDS church on the corner. And then also from the flooding on the 9th of March 9th, or on the night of March 9th into the early hours of the 10th, the drainage ditch grate that sits right on the corner in front of the ball fields on Mountain View and Joseph was damaged. And that actually had plugged, and flooding water, everything was up on the roadway, so there was a lot of activity that night there. We also had damage right out here on 3rd Street, and the pavement somewhat disintegrated. And then also on 6th Street over here on the hill in, between like Van Buren and the street right out here, I can mind blanking out. Yes. There was kind of a ditch in the pavement that happened in there. We realized that there was an underground spring and some other more technical details that Les could fill you in on, but it was damaged. And so we looked at all these projects. FEMA came back and told us that they weren't sure that they really could help us because it looked like a lot of the projects, or looked like these projects, weren't caused by damages during the declaration period, which was March 6th through the 28th. So we heard back from them a few days later, and they said, but we still think we can help you. And so we met with them again and went through this process of a lot of paperwork. In the meantime, the 3 projects that are listed on your emergency relief funds box on your staff report were moving forward through the Idaho Office of Emergency Management under consideration. It was a program that the local Highway Technical Assistance Council was running for the state, and they were considering projects. What was different was that these funds were separate from the declaration, but coming from the state, but federal money as a roll down that would help assist with the damages done to the streets. So we had 3 different rounds of funding that they put projects out for. There was round 1, which was May 15th, and we were notified that we didn't have any projects that were awarded out of those 3 that we had submitted. Then on the round for June 15th, we had heard that Joseph Street, for the paving section of the road, had been considered and would likely receive funding. And then later on in the summer, it was actually in August when we heard, but there was another round of funding, if they still had money available, that was open on July 1. And we didn't hear anything for quite a while, and then we found out that the 6th Street project had actually been selected too. And we had been told at that point in time that 3rd Street didn't meet the criteria. And so we had to provide information to them that FEMA was not funding the paving or the repair of the Joseph Street Hill project. In the meantime, we waited. They said additional paperwork would come and we would fill it out. And during that time, then FEMA came back and we worked with them, and they said that they could assist us with the citywide funding where we had done all of the sandbagging, and we had volunteer labor and staff, and work with us to refund or reimburse us for the work done to fix the grate on Joseph Street and Mountain View and the ditch. So that was the process. We continued to get information and letters, and then we had not heard from Idaho Office of Emergency Management at all, other than we got kind of a cryptic letter. And so we waited. And last week I started getting emails from them asking for additional information. And she said, can you send me an email that says 3 things? And so my email said, this confirms that all 3 of the projects, 3rd Street, 6th Street, and Joseph Street, submitted to the Emergency Relief Fund, were not damaged during the presidential declaration disaster period of March 6th through the 17th. 6th through the 28th, 2017. The damages to all 3 streets were due to extreme weather conditions that occurred throughout the winter period of 2016-17, and we did not receive any FEMA funds or federal highway funds for these 3 requests that were attached to our emergency relief funds. And I did note that, however, we had received or were proposing or thought we would receive funding from FEMA for the ditch repair on Joseph and Mountain View. The next day, I received the agreements that were in your packages from the Emergency Relief Fund. The first one is for the Joseph Street pavement repair, which we had known, but we didn't know what the amounts were going to be. And they allocated the full amount that was requested with the information that had been submitted. That was $144,600, and they will reimburse us 90% of those costs. And keep in mind, though, we still have to provide receipts and document time. They will also reimburse us for staff, administration, and for the engineering's time and any other mobilization costs we had or setup costs, bid specs, or any of that. So now that we've received these documents, we'll stop putting together that information, and then we can submit for reimbursement. I don't know that it will be the full amount on all three of these exactly, if all of our costs will add up to that, but that's the maximum amount that we can receive. The next one then was the 3rd Street grind and inlay. So out of my surprise when I received these agreements on Friday, or I guess it was Thursday, 3rd Street was in the group. And I had asked them several times, I don't understand why this other one was eligible and this one wasn't, because it was the same damage as what had happened on Joseph Street. And so, the lady asked me for that email and said, well, we'll see. And so I included it in that email, and we got the agreement. That's all I know. So we were really excited to see that. That's an additional $159,000. I don't know as of right now. I haven't had a chance to work with Tyler to find out what all the costs are, but that certainly was unanticipated, and work that we did go ahead and have done this summer because we needed to have it done. But we had anticipated paying that through city funding. So we'll submit that for reimbursement. And then also a project that we haven't finished is the 6th Street under drain installation and pavement repair. So that's work that the city crews anticipate completing still this winter and getting that fixed so that further damage isn't done in the upcoming winter season. Then we move on to FEMA. This was a process that the amount of money that we're receiving, the total amount, I'm not sure that bottom line it's much of a profit for the city at this point because of all the paperwork that we went through. However, I will tell you this. I learned a lot, and I certainly will have a standard operating procedure to present to Les through this process to use in anticipation of future flooding events. We had to provide a lot of documentation that we didn't anticipate having to provide. And so multiple hours that were spent tracking down information and trying to remember who all was volunteering on the night of the 9th, who was sandbagging, a list of the volunteer firefighters, community members, staff members, those types of things. So we went through a great deal of paperwork and a process, which we'll know next time to have someone out there taking pictures and documenting during that time and asking volunteers to sign a list or tracking down that information shortly thereafter, not a few months thereafter. So through this process, the first document you have there is it's called Citywide Debris Removal, and the language is somewhat cryptic, and you read in there's work to be completed, work completed, direct administrative costs, and a lot of different codes and things. Tyler, Les, I, Steve Schulte, everyone in finance worked and pulled information together. I have a notebook that's about 3 inches thick for this this money, but I think it was very well worth it, and we'll have a process in the future. So we still have a few things to finish up. We need to complete the repair on the ditch in front of the LDS Church on Mountain View, and then we'll need to go through a closeout process and document just a few more things. So we received funding for citywide debris removal, and that was for pretty much the Mountain View corridor. And the amount on that one was $8,793, or excuse me, $8,700.93. The second one in your packet is for the ditch repair on both the grate and the drainage ditch on Joseph Street, and that's the one we still have a little bit of work to do. and expenses there, but it'll all be in-kind staff and materials. And that one's for $5,413.02. And the third one is for the volunteer labor that we had on site that night through the fire department and city employees, and then overtime was reimbursed. And that, was something we weren't aware that we could do. Sandbagging cost, I think there was a little over 2,000, maybe 3,000 sandbags, we're not quite sure. And then pick up and removal of any debris afterwards or sandbags that people didn't want. And then the fourth one for $3,295.72 was also, it says citywide sandbagging, but this paid for the labor costs for the night of March 9th for the sandbags that were distributed, and also some debris removal on Mountain View and Joseph. So, with your approval, I can go ahead and have the mayor sign the emergency relief fund request, and then go ahead and finish processing the FEMA request. So earlier on your agenda tonight, though, which was also a part of all of this communication that we had, when we had that kickoff meeting when FEMA was here, we showed them some of the pictures of the flooding at the Bridge Street Bridge area. And they said, oh, well, that project, meets the criteria for the HMPG program that was on the consent agenda tonight. So having that kickoff meeting and meeting with FEMA brought us to a point where we are now preparing and working on submitting that application this Friday. So even though there was a lot of paperwork, we received a great deal of funding from everything, and a lot of lessons learned, and we'll be prepared the next time.
Excellent persistence. Boy, you were
only me wants my job.
Well, yes, and we're glad you have it. I can tell you that right now. But it's a team effort with engineering and a number of different folks,
definitely.
finance and so on and so forth throughout our entire staff. So these things don't come just by one or two people. It's an effort by many. But you talking about that 3-inch book that you have now of all the notes and stuff, and the neat thing about that is it just makes the next time a lot easier how we can present it and go forward with it. So congratulations on that extra effort. Questions for Alicia before we? Walter, get first.
Let Art go ahead.
Art?
It's more for Gary, but does this involve the necessity to reopen the budget to accept these funds?
No, sir.
Okay, Walter.
At least not at this time.
I would echo the mayor. Kudos, Elisa, to you, Les, Tyler, Steve, and the cast of city employees that persisted and made all this work and come together. With that, I would make a motion, Mr. Mayor, that we authorize acceptance of grant funding from the Office of Emergency Management under the emergency relief funding of $325,215, and from FEMA under the Presidential Declaration for Public Assistance Disaster-Related Cost estimated at $13,972.25.
I second that.
And give it to Art.
Okay, well, we've got a motion by Walter and a second by Art. I'll give that to him, Catherine. To authorize acceptance of grant funding from the Idaho Office of Emergency Management under the Emergency Relief Funding of $325,215, and from FEMA under the Presidential's Declaration of Public Assistance Disaster-Related Costs estimated at $13,972.25. With that, John, I'll start the roll with you.
Aye.
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 Thank you again, and I will sign that baby for as soon as you need me to sign it.
Okay.
Lisa, how's that?
I just wanted to share one thing. They did also tell us that they were very impressed that we had a volunteer fire department and so many community members that were willing to go out and sandbag and help on flooding events. They were very impressed with that. So another kudos to our fire department.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.